So thanks, Deepak. So first I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this meeting. I don't have any end-of-range project, but I got an invitation and I'm happy to be a part of this meeting. So I'm going to talk about many-body localization, and without worrying too much about the subtle issues of stability of the ambial phase in the infinite size systems, I'm going to focus more on some of the features which I think are very interesting and relevant in these disordered interacting quantum systems. So I'm basically planning to talk about two things. First is some exact relations which we could prove between various norms of quantum coherence and measure of localization, which are very general and hold true for any quantum state. And I'm going to talk about their application in context of many-body localization and show you that the combined effect of disorder and interactions can help in preserving quantum coherence for some of the quantum states. So generally, localization always acts against coherence, and you expect that if the system has very strong disorder and it is trying to get localized, then the coherence will get suppressed. I will show you that if you focus on a subsystem of the full system rather than looking at the coherence of the full system, then subsystem coherence can be enhanced because of a combined effect of disorder and interactions. And I would also like to talk about single particle excitations across many-body localization transition. So single particle excitations are a very common tool in condensed matter physics to describe metal insulator transitions, Mott insulators, superconductors, but somehow these quantities were not explored in context of many-body localization. So I will show you that single particle excitations have a lot of useful information about many-body localization, and it also helps in characterizing the nature of the transition. So although Fabian has given a very fantastic introduction to this topic of many-body localization in his talk, I am going to give a very brief introduction just to set the stage. So think of a very generic quantum system where you have particles hopping around on a lattice. There is some source of random disorder, for example, an on-site potential, and these particles are interacting with each other. So here, for example, I have written a Hamiltonian for a system of spinless fermions which are hopping around on a lattice, and there is this on-site potential h of I, and there is repulsion between these fermions. So for the purpose of this talk, I will confine myself only to one dimension because it's only in one dimension we have a mathematical proof for the existence of many-body localized phase in the presence of strong disorder and weak interactions. Now, if you don't have interactions in this system, you know what happens, that all the single particle states are localized exponentially, and this is what we call Anderson localization. The system is diffusionless, it is an insulator. What happens when you turn on the interaction? This question has remained unanswered for many years after the first work by Anderson in 1958. I think the simplest way to try understanding this model is to map it onto an effective Anderson model, an effective non-interacting model, on something called a Fock space graph. Okay, so here all the effect of random disorder as well as interaction between the fermions goes into the local energy on this Fock space graph, and the hopping connects different nodes of this graph. So, although you have an effective non-interacting model now on this graph, but this graph is very peculiar because the connectivity varies from node to node. For example, here at the top and the bottom, if you just have nearest neighbor hopping, the connectivity is of order 1 or 2, and as you go down the graph, the connectivity increases and becomes of the order of the system size. So it's not possible to come up with analytical tools, easily at least, to understand this system, and most of the development has happened by numerical exact analyzation of this Hamiltonian, these kind of Hamiltonians for fermions or spins numerically. Now, what do you expect? If you have weak disorder, then many-body eigenstates of this Hamiltonian will get contribution from almost all the nodes in the Fock space, and it will be an extended state. But if the disorder is large enough, then you will get contribution only from from exponentially suppressed nodes in the Fock space graph, resulting in ergodicity breaking, and this is what we call many-body localization. Now, since the system in the many-body localized phase is non-ergodic, it's not going to thermalize on its own. So if you think an isolated quantum system, generally a part of the system can thermalize with rest of the system acting as its path, provided the system is ergodic. But if the system has strong disorder and interactions and it is in the many-body localized phase, that will not happen. And what you actually see is a strong memory of the initial state in this system, and that was the first indication from experiments in cold atom systems where they prepare system in a charge density wave pattern, and if the system has strong enough disorder, then even after a long time system remembers that it was prepared from this very special initial state where there was occupancy on the alternate side. But if you don't have any disorder, then in the long time limit, of course, it forgets about the initial state you started with, and all the sites get uniformly occupied. But there's something more to it. If you look at the intermediate disorder, then this density imbalance, it actually decays as a power law, and the exponent decreases as the disorder strength increases. And this quench dynamics has been used to predict the transition point in many-body localized systems. I have something small and interesting to point out here, that the dynamics, quench dynamics, is not only a property of the system that you are studying. Once the system becomes non-ergodic, it is also a property of the initial state you start with. So for example, we looked at some very special initial states, like the one in which you put all the particles on one corner of the lattice, which has one kink in the density profile. You can put particles in the middle of the lattice, which has two kink in density profile, and so on. So if the system is fully delocalized and ergodic, then it doesn't matter from which initial state you start with. In the long time limit, it is going to forget about the initial state that you started with. But once the system is non-ergodic, it depends from where you are starting, and it remembers the dynamics. I mean, everywhere in the dynamics of the system, the initial state is reflected. So for example, if you're sitting at a large enough disorder value, where not all the many-body eigenstates are still localized. Some of the eigenstates in the middle of the spectrum are extended. Now what you see is, although from a initial state like charge density wave, you see a power law in the density imbalance, but if you look at a one kink state, then there is no power law decay in the density imbalance. And now why does it happen? Because if you look at some very special initial states like one kink state and all, they get contribution only from the eigenstates which are at the top and bottom of the many-body spectrum. So these are the localized states, and since a long time evolution comes from the long-range resonances in the system, there is no decay of the density imbalance in the long time limit when you are starting from states like one kink state or two kink state. But if you look at a more generic initial state which has a larger participation ratio in the eigenbases of the spectrum, then of course you can get the contribution from these extended states also, and there is a long-range resonance effect which is reflected in the power law decay of the density imbalance. And same thing is seen in the growth of entanglement entropy. So you start with the product state which has zero entanglement entropy, and if you look at the time evolution of the system, the entanglement entropy grows, but not for all the initial states. For a state which has larger overlaps with the many-body eigenstates of the system, you see a large growth of the entanglement entropy. But for one kink state is very special. Again, it doesn't have any contribution at this value of disorder from the extended eigenstates in the system, and you don't see any growth of entanglement entropy after the initial rapid growth. So the point I'm trying to make is that since people have tried to use the exponent they extract from the time evolution of the density imbalance and get a phase diagram for the system where they say, okay, for very weak disorder you have diffusive, and then for very large disorder you have a many-body localized system, and there is an intervening subdiffusive phase which is generally explained in terms of rare region effects. But this phase diagram is also dependent on the initial state you are starting with. So the transition point you will try to predict may be actually much smaller than the actual transition point if you end up starting with something like a one kink state. One has to be careful about it. Now coming to the subdiffusive phase, it is of course nobody can argue the presence of rare regions in this system with random disorder, and there is a Griffiths phase which leads to the subdiffusive nature of the dynamics. But this subdiffusive phase has also been seen in many-body localized systems which have quasi-periodic, deterministic quasi-periodic potential. So there are no rare regions and there is no Griffiths phase, but still there is a subdiffusive phase. So I think there is much more to this subdiffusive phase. Of course, we are limited by the system sizes, that's one of the reasons. But it can also be because of a combined effect of presence of both extended and localized state and the intermediate disorder strength, which can lead to this kind of subdiffusive phase. And the size of this subdiffusive phase can be made larger if you have some long range interaction in the system, as long as the interaction itself is random and changing sign. If you have long range interactions which are uniform, then the phase diagram remains more or less same. But if your interactions are random and long range, then there is a broad subdiffusive phase and the many-body localization turns on at a much larger value of disorder. And this is the phase diagram that is obtained from the statics, that is by looking at the statistics of eigenfunctions, eigenvalues, entanglement entropy and all. And what it tells you, if you fix the strength of interaction in the system and look at the energy eigenstate as a function of disorder, then states in the middle of the spectrum get localized at the end, means they require largest amount of disorder to undergo a many-body localized phase. Now, this phase diagram remains almost unchanged whether you have nearest neighbor interactions or long range interaction, as long as the hopping is short range. I'm talking only about the fermionic models here. But if you have random long range interaction, then of course you need a much larger strength of disorder, local disorder, to make the system go into a many-body localized phase. So now in the rest of my talk, I'm basically going to focus on this part, this phase diagram, which comes from the statics. I'm going to introduce two new characterizations, one from the single particle excitations and one from the quantum coherence. And, I'm also trying to answer the question like, what is the nature of this transition? Okay, so single particle excitations. Again, look at the same model of spinless fermions where you have random disorder. So I'm going to focus on both the cases, random disorder as well as the quasi-periodic potential in the presence of nearest neighbor interaction. Now, what do you do to study single particle excitations? You calculate the single particle Green's function. So generally we calculate this Green's function either in the ground state or in the finite temperature thermal phase of a system. But here we don't have a thermal phase, so we calculate Green's function in every nth eigenstate of the system. We also write a generalized Dyson equation for every nth eigenstate of the system, which comes from the Green's function in the interacting and the non-interacting system. Now, if you do the Fourier transform of these Green's functions, the imaginary part of the Green's function will give you the density of states of the single particle excitations at frequency omega and site I in the nth eigenstate, and how these single particle excitations scatter with each other is that information is hidden in the scattering rate, which comes from the imaginary part of the self energy. The local density of states have been explored in context of non-interacting system, but somehow they were never explored in context of many-body localization. And so I think I might. So what do you expect? So you basically start with an nth eigenstate of the system and create a particle-hole excitation, a particle-hole pair on top of it. Okay, so you have an excited state which has either one extra particle or one less particle compared to the system you started with. Now, if you look at the expression for local density of state, that's how it looks like. So, what do you expect? That if your eigenstate that you started with is localized, then even the excited state will have contribution from very few eigenstates of this n plus 1th particle system or n minus 1th particle system, and this excitation will not propagate over all the eigenstates which are allowed by this energy conservation. But if you have an extended state, it will. So that is why you expect the density of state to be small if your at most of the sites, if your system is localized. But if your system is if your eigenstate is extended, then you expect the density of state to be finite. So let's look at the probability distribution of these local density of states and scattering rates. So already at intermediate to weak disorder strength, I will call it intermediate disorder strength, I think the best fit of the probability distribution function comes from the log normal distribution. And as you increase the strength of disorder, then the peak shifts more and more to the smaller values, and the distribution function has a long tail. And here also you can see the same effect. So what it basically tells you that since both the quantities are distributed very asymmetrically, average of the probability distribution is not a very appropriate quantity to describe the phase transition as a function of disorder. So one should look at the typical values of this distribution rather than the average values of the distribution to describe the phase transition. And that's what we do. So we actually look at the ratio of typical to average value of the local density of state and the ratio of typical to average value of the scattering rates. And if you look at it as a function of disorder, you see in the weak disorder strength or the weak disorder, this ratio increases with the system size, and as you increase the disorder strength, the ratio decreases, and finally there is a very weak system size dependence, and the typical values of the local density of state and scattering rates, they become much smaller than the average values. It means that the single particle excitations are not able to propagate, they are localized in the system when you have very large disorder. But it also means something interesting, that just before the typical value of density of state really becomes zero, you are still able to create those excitations, single particle excitations, and since there are very few of those states, they will not scatter much. So if you create a state, it will live for a very long time. But if you don't create, if the disorder becomes very, very large, you won't be able to create a state. So now to extract the critical point from the transition point from this local density of state and scattering rates, we did finite size scaling of the ratio of typical to average local density of states and scattering rates, assuming that the correlation length diverges at the transition point as a power law. And so we calculated the cost function and looked at the minima of the cost function to obtain the transition point and the critical exponent. And what we see is that, so these are the transition points from both the quantities, and the critical exponent is greater than 2 for both of them. So what is the significance of this critical exponent being greater than 2 by d, because d is equal to 1 for our system? So there was a very interesting paper by Chase, Fisher and Spencer in 1986, where they said that for all systems with quench random disorder that undergo continuous transition with a power law divergence of the correlation length at the critical point, the critical exponent nu must be greater than or equal to 2 by d, irrespective of whether the clean system undergoes any transition or not. This is like a generalized Harris criteria, because Harris criteria just tells you that if nu is greater than or equal to 2 by d, then the disorder is irrelevant and the transition that was there already in the clean system remains stable even in the presence of disorder. But this is a much stronger statement, because it says that irrespective of any transition in the clean system, if there is a transition in the presence of quench random disorder, nu must be greater than or equal to 2 by d for a continuous transition. And interestingly, it has been seen for Anderson localization, or high dimensional Anderson localization, where there is a metal to insulator transition. The critical exponent has been found to be satisfying CCFS criteria always. So it's very natural to expect that this criteria should always be obeyed for many body localized system, and in fact our calculation of the single particle local density of states and scattering rates show that as I was showing you here, that the critical exponent always comes out to be more than 2 by d. Well, I mean, even for one-dimensional Anderson model, people have seen that for WC equal to 0, nu is greater than or equal. Well, WC infinite, I don't know how will you handle numerically, but WC equal to 0 you can of course have. So the CCFS criteria is known to be satisfied for Anderson localization, and one would expect that it should hold true for many body localized system also. But the controversy comes from the fact that although real space renormalization group calculation, which were mainly phenomenology based, they showed a consistency with the CCFS criteria, but most of the conventional diagnostics of many body localization, like level spacing ratio and sublattice fluctuations in magnetizations or bipartite entanglement entropy, none of these quantities showed a critical exponent which is even close to 2. It was always much less than 1. But we see that not only in the presence of nearest neighbor interaction, even if you have uniform power law long range interaction, the critical exponent from the single particle local density of states and scattering rates is always more than 2. But if we look at for the same model, if you look at the level spacing ratio, again of course you see that the critical exponent is much less than 1, and it is consistent with most of the other works, and the transition point is also much smaller. There is a possibility that there are two different transitions, one captured by the ergodic to non-ergodic transition captured by the level spacing ratio, and actually the delocalization to localization transition that one sees in the single particle excitation spectrum. and that is why one also see very different critical points. Or it is possible that the difference in transition point is just a finite size effect, but then I don't know why the critical points are so different. And interestingly, this critical point is consistent with the critical point one gets when you calculate Green's function and self energies in the Fock space rather than calculating them in the real space like we were calculating. We also looked at the many-body localization in systems with quasi-periodic boundary model. And there for the non-interacting model, you already have a transition at h equal to 2, and you can see that if you calculate the local density of states, it continuously goes to 0 at the transition point, and the critical exponent is less than 2, so it doesn't satisfy the CCFS criteria, as it should not, because it's not a quench random disorder. So this was just done as a benchmark of the calculation, and the same thing happens in the presence of interacting boundary model. Basically, if you calculate something like single particle local density of state and scattering rate, you can see that the system with random disorder and quasi-periodic potential, they belong to different universality classes. But if you calculate more conventional diagnostics like level spacing ratio, we always see that the critical exponent is much less than 1, and the two classes of systems look very similar to each other. So I have just one question, like since the nu is greater than or equal to 2 by d for system with quench random disorder, is the system hyper-uniform? Maybe some of the people in the audience who are expert in that will comment on it. Okay, so now I will try to tell you the story in the remaining 5-6 minutes that I have. Yeah, about quantum coherence across many-body localization transition. So let's look at some basic definitions. So suppose you have a density matrix describing your quantum state, then these are the basic definitions. We are going to look at the L1 norm of quantum coherence, which is just the sum of off-diagonal matrix element, L2 norm of quantum coherence, and relative entropy of quantum coherence, which is the difference between the diagonal entropy and the von Neumann entropy. All these definitions satisfy the condition that C of rho is always greater than or equal to 0. Under any incoherence operation, C rho does not increase, and it's a convex function of quantum states. So whenever you try to come up with the norm of quantum coherence, these criteria must be satisfied. Now let's look at a pure state for which the density matrix is simply given like this. So one can show some very simple identities that the L1 norm of coherence plus inverse participation ratio, which is defined like this, when the state is written like this in a basis alpha, is bounded between 1 to NF. And similarly, if you look at the relative entropy of coherence for this pure state, the C relative plus IPR is also bounded between 1 to log NF. Now this is, so if your state is conventionally extended, then you know that IPR goes to 0 as the system size goes to infinity, and the L1 norm of coherence goes as n-1. NF is the dimension of the Fock space, so NF is the dimension of the Fock space. If you have a conventionally extended state, both C1 and C relative are very large. One is of the order of NF-1 and another is of the order of log of NF. But if you go to a localized state when IPR is of order 1, then it's obvious to see that C1 and C relative will go to 0. So that's what one generally expects, that you go to a localized state, your coherence, any norm of coherence you pick up should go to 0 in the localized state. But something very interesting happens when you look at the mixed state rather than the pure states. Okay, so one can show that for mixed state, L2 norm of coherence plus IPR is always bounded from above by 1. And you can also prove these identities between relative entropy of coherence, IPR, and the mixedness of the state, which is bounded by D, where D is the dimensionality of your density matrix. And the relative entropy of coherence and IPR times the number of non-zero eigenvalues of the system is always greater than or equal to 1. So these inequalities might not mean anything immediately, but if you look at them, stare at them for some time, then it helps you in understanding that there is a big difference in the effect of disorder in pure and mixed state. For a pure state, if this is a maximally extended state, is also maximally coherent, but that is not true for the mixed state, because the coherence of an extended state, if it is a mixed state, doesn't necessarily have to be large, and it can be very small. So let me just show you. So we looked at this model of spinless fermions with nearest neighbor and next nearest neighbor repulsion, but nearest neighbor hopping in the presence of random disorder. And here are some results for the L2 norm of coherence calculated for a subsystem. So where is the mixed state coming in my system now? So I divide my system into two sublattices, and if I calculate the reduced density matrix for one of the subsystem, that is basically a mixed state, and it should satisfy these identities that we have developed. So if you calculate the relative the L2 norm of coherence for subsystem, then you see that as a function of disorder for fixed strength of interaction, the coherence increases. And same thing happens for the relative entropy of coherence. If you look at the normalized relative entropy of coherence for subsystem A, it increases here as a function of system size for weak disorder, and you see a slight decrease here when you go to the very large disorder. So in both these quantities, you see a crossing at a point which is very close to the crossing seen in the level spacing ratio. So the relative entropy of coherence for subsystem, one of the subsystem, and similarly the L2 norm of coherence for subsystem captures the delocalization to many-body localization transition almost as well as what is done by level spacing ratio. And the more interesting thing is the coherence of subsystem A gets enhanced due to combined effect of disorder and interactions. And it can have interesting applications for quantum devices, for example, superconducting qubit arrays. So, for example, in this Brooklyn chip of IBM, people have seen that it's not possible to control Josephson energies beyond certain error bar. So, if you look at the probability distribution of the Josephson energies, it is almost a Gaussian, and the way the standard deviation of this is more or less of the same order for various chips. So, here is the data for various chips, and this is the variance in the Josephson energy. So basically you have an effective, at some low energy level, you have an effective model of bosons which has disorder in it and which has interaction because these qubits are coupled to each other. And people have studied localization to chaos transition in these quantum qubits. So my statement about this is that one should not worry too much about disorder in the Josephson energies, because if system has strong enough disorder, it might help in preserving coherence for a subsystem of the qubits. Even though if you look at the full qubit arrays, the coherence will go down once the system is localized, but coherence of subsystem can always be preserved with the combined effect of disorder and interactions. So with this, I would like to stop.
Long live India and France friendship.